Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Pre-Race. Joe Samaniego here, along with Amanda Kaufman and Isha Azim from Racing with Isha. A big thank you to our Patreon subscribers. Calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. They have been mailed their Grid Network stickers. You too can get a Grid Network sticker by subscribing, investing into the Grid Network each and every month through Patreon. You can also do Buy Me a Coffee, a one-time contribution to the Grid Network or to any one of our Grid Network teams. They'll greatly appreciate it and they'll thank you on the air. Before we get to MotoGP, we got to start with some big breaking news, historic news. Marta Garcia, the 2023 and inaugural F1 Academy champion, wrapping it up at Circus of the Americas. Isha, Amanda, Garcia is now the first champion. Thoughts and reaction on this big news?
Joe, well, first off, congratulations to Marta Garcia. This is a big accomplishment for her, and I think it's a very well deserved championship win as well. Now, also, when we look at the F1 Academy overall, I'm really excited to see everything that they've done in this inaugural season and just to see where they're going to go with it because, I think the whole concept of bringing women into motorsports and giving them these opportunities is amazing. And I'm also just excited to see what Marta Garcia does now for the next season and where she's going to be.
Yeah, I have to agree completely that it's awesome to see Marta wrap up her season. She got out front early and was able to stay there and had a really strong season. And to take home the inaugural win is a great thing to do, especially with the series, being so new and being so high profile. So, knowing that she most likely can't return, that'll be interesting to see where this takes her and where she lands. I think that where she lands will directly kind of affect the perception that people have of F1 Academy and its success, because that'll speak to how well the series is preparing these drivers and serving as a launching pad and doing its job to get these drivers into other series within the F1 ladder.
Going to be very exciting to see what happens with Marta Garcia. Got this done. Overall, I know this is the first year a lot of people will talk about, oh, there was no broadcast and all those issues, but still great accomplishment from her to go out there, get so many race wins, now move up to that next stage. We'll be following her on Women in Motorsports and recapping the entire race weekend right there. So be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss our Women in Motorsports show. Isha, it's weird. We're talking about the recap of the Grand Prix race for the MotoGP, so you missed that. This is everyone's recap on it, and what a race we saw.
Yes, Joe, what a MotoGP Grand Prix that was. It was a thrilling Grand Prix that saw a last lap pass, a first time winner, and an excited Pecco Bagnaia finishing in second place. Now, Jorge Martin led every lap, but he came 8 corners short of winning the race from the pole. Now, his rear soft tire ran out of grip while everyone else, except two others, were on medium or hard tires. So, Joe, was the decision to go with the soft rear a costly mistake for him?
It's easy for everyone to look back and say this was a big mistake because you knew the soft tire was going to be a big challenge to last the entire race at Phillips Island. This track is notorious for going through soft tires and just all the tires. Earlier in the race, we saw a close up of Brad Binder's medium tire, and you could see the chunks of rubber just flying off. That's where I was thinking, Jorge Martin, if he could pull this off, this is going to be an epic drive. We're going to be talking about this as a championship moment. He was 8 corners short, while the other two riders on the software tire came well short of being up towards the front. Jorge Martin put on a heck of an effort today, going out there having a 1.4 second lead, and then slowly went away. I know he has a lot of questions about if I had done this, maybe took a lap earlier, a little easier, I could have probably gotten that win. I think overall that team has to feel confident because at the end of the day, they still have potentially one more opportunity to get a win, valuable points, and we still have plenty of races in the MotoGP season. It's not over yet. I think the championship battle is still a long way to go, so I do not consider it a costly mistake. This was a great strategy move. Jorge Martin shows the kind of rider he is to take care of that tire and put on that fast pace. He shouldn't be regretting going on the soft tires. If anything, I think everyone has to be nervous. Look what he could do with tire management.
That's right, Joe. And as you mentioned, this isn't his last opportunity. And now the rider who made the pass for the win was his teammate, Johann Zarco. Now, the Frenchman's first MotoGP win in his career, and he finally did his celebratory backflip successfully. So, Joe, the memes of Zarco with zero wins can finally be retired. How motivating is this for him?
This is so motivating, and I think this is one of the feel good stories of the year. 2016 Valencia, his last win in Moto 2. This is just insane to think he's been that long without a win. I know a lot of people would talk about Nico Hulkenberg in F1 and how he hasn't won a race. We also know Roman Grosjean has gone a long time without winning a race, and he's in IndyCar. For Johann Zarco, over 100 races to not get a win, there were people thinking, can he really get the job done? Could he ever get that elusive win? We've seen drivers always come up close, no cigar. Riders come up close, nothing. Johann Zarco, I think, really signs a lot of doubters and the momentum he has to feel because Jorge Martin, his teammate, has been really showing what he could do on the bike and how good that Ducati bike is. Now Zarco is showing I could go out there get the win. And one of the things, Isha, I know we've talked about this. It seems you get that first win, that confidence is there. You could potentially get another win that next race weekend or another. If we get the sprint race, if the weather doesn't play an impact, Zarco could be one of the favorites. And where nobody had him for pick a winner, maybe somebody might pick him for pick a winner for the sprint race now.
That's right, Joe. This could definitely rocket his support and confidence as well. And we could see him being a real contender for the rest of the races as well. Now, looking towards a driver who was in trouble, we have Pecco Bagnaia, who was in fifth place and not at the pace of Martin. Now, in the last two laps, five riders were all within striking distance of the lead. Pecco came up to a second place and was celebrating. He now leads by 27 points, and tomorrow's sprint race is doubtful. So, Joe, do you think Pecco, the big winner yesterday, and what stood out from his race?
He has to feel like the big winner because at the point of the race, he was a second slower than Jorge Martin. We were wondering, can Jorge Martin wrap this up, get that win? Didn't work out, but this is where I think Pecco is probably the reason why he's celebrating is he put on together a great race. He didn't push the limit, crash out. He rode it there with Brad Binder, Fabio Di Gianantonio, just racing there, taking care of the tires, the position, because at the end, when we had Jorge Martin getting caught up by Zarco, Pecco, Brad Binder, Fabio, it was a game on. He made it a move to get second place, capitalized that. I mean, if he couldn't get a win, second place is the second most points, of course. Where Jorge Martin, fifth place, quite a ways down, extends that points lead. I think this has to be hugely motivating for that team, for Pecco Bagnaia, and I do feel like he has to feel like sort of the big winner. Everyone's going to be talking about Sarko. Of course, he won the race. Everyone's talking about him being the big winner of the weekend already. But for Pecco Bagnaia, the way he was celebrating on the bike, you thought he won that race. And I think he knew this was one of my best races. I didn't win the race, but I didn't crash it. I didn't lose control. I kept it there. And when the race came to me, I made the move and got second place. I think that's part of the reason why he was so celebratory for second place finish.
Yes, definitely, Joe. And now many people might be wondering how unusual it is to recap the Grand Prix today and to then preview the sprint tomorrow. So the reason for this swap is bad weather in the forecast and MotoGP moving the shorter race to Sunday. So Joe, does this move make sense? And if we do get a sprint race, what are three items that you're looking at?
I think this was a smart move by MotoGP. The weather is going to be very questionable the next day. Half the sprint race, less points on the line, is a shorter race. So you're not trying to rush the entire Grand Prix beating the weather. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Moto 2, Moto 3. Granted, they're going to be going first. If the weather could hold off to get those races in, potentially the sprint race, and then here comes the nasty weather, everyone's going to be looking at what MotoGP, the FIM did this weekend as a potential copy move if you have F1 sprint races and you got nasty weather coming on Sunday, or even NASCAR. I could see looking at something like this. Granted, there's a lot of logistics when you have to make moves like this. So I got to applaud the FIM for doing this because It's not easy just changing your entire schedule from everything on Sunday to suddenly it's going to be Saturday. And if we're lucky, we'll get the sprint race in. Big credit to them. I think this was a smart move. If we get that sprint race, three things I'm looking at. First, tire management. That's going to be out the window. It's a shorter race. The soft tires, everyone's going to be on them. So I think the competition is going to be really stiff for everybody. That will lead to my second point. Jorge Martin. He's going to be up front. He's going to be on the pole. But now that it's neutralized with everyone on that soft tire, the competition is going to be really hard. I think what we saw last year at Phillips Island, where everybody was in the pack, I think we might be getting that tomorrow. I think we're going to get a lot more pack racing compared to today. You still had that pack of five at the finish, but with everyone on the same soft tires, I think it's going to be a really intense race. And thirdly, the battle between Pecco Bagnaia, Jorge Martin, and Marco Beschecchi. He was absent from today's Grand Prix race. I think tomorrow he's going to be up there towards the front. If we have that pack, he's going to work his way towards the front. So I see those three really battling out, and I would not be surprised if we have a moment where there's contact between the two or three of them in this race. So I think if we do get that sprint race, it's going to be very exciting, but it's just going to be a matter of what happens with the weather.
That's right, Joe. And speaking of sprint races, let's now turn towards Formula One at the Circuit of the Americas.
Circus of Americas is going to be a very exciting race weekend, a major weekend for Formula One in general, being in the United States, and now added a sprint race later today, the sprint shootout coming up just about an hour away from now. And one of the big shocks from yesterday's qualifying, Max Verstappen, he'll be starting sixth place in the Grand Prix race. His lap time that was faster than Charles Leclerc deleted due to track limits. So Charles Leclerc inherits the pole. Lando Norris is second. And one of the big things, Isha, when it comes to this race, a lot of people are wondering, can Max come from sixth place and get the win? But we know Ferraris, they're pretty fast. And McLaren, they've been very fast getting podiums as of recently. So Isha, starting with you, up front, do you think we're going to see the bigger battle between the Ferrari and the McLaren for the win? Or are they going to be racing to put distance from a potential Max Verstappen comeback?
Now, Joe, the thing is, for Max Verstappen to come up 5 places, it's not a big deal. We've seen him do it in the past this season as well. However, the only difference now is that the cars ahead of him, specifically the 2 Ferraris and the McLaren, are doing much better than they were earlier on in the season, right? That's the main difference, is that the upgrades that the cars have brought, it gives them a lot more speed and pace. So, I think that the bigger battle is going to be trying to keep Max Verstappen behind. And I think that there might even be a chance of seeing a sort of partnership up front to keep Max Verstappen behind, sort of like we saw, I believe, in Singapore, with Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz. I think we might see something similar this time between the first and second place, which would be Leclerc and Norris as well. But I think that the real battle is going to be keeping him behind rather than racing for that first position, because we know that Max is going to be trying his hardest to get in front and reclaim that pole position.
I have to agree completely. I think that up front, the focus should be just maintaining the lead and staying in front for Charles. But once you get through turn one, I think that if they can minimize the fighting between the first couple positions, the longer they can do that, the longer they'll be able to keep Max behind. And then obviously, when it's time to go for the win, you got to go for the win. But I think that that should happen later on, if they want to have the best chance of seeing a race winner that's not Max.
It'll be huge. We don't have Max winning a race, especially here in the United States. I think a lot of fans tuning in, particularly because it is the United States Grand Prix. All eyes on this race Sunday. McLaren, they have to be feeling good with everything going on right now. Lando starting second place, Oscar Piastri in 10th place. Their big rival in the constructors, Aston Martin, they're 17th and 19th in the points. Lance Stroll starting 19th, just only ahead of the American favorite Logan Sargent. So, Amanda, is Aston Martin's season falling apart? And what do you see as the main reason as it seems to be potentially falling apart?
Things definitely haven't been trending in the right direction for Aston Martin. I mean, coming out, starting the season on such a high, Fernando with all those consecutive podiums, and Lance keeping pace for the first couple races with him. Um, it doesn't seem like Aston Martin is headed in the right direction. It's going to be hard for them to maintain their position in the constructors if they don't turn things around quickly and regain some of the pace that they seem to have lost in comparison to the other teams. Seems like the other teams have taken steps forward, whereas Aston Martin has remained a little bit stagnant, which is causing them to slip back.
Yeah, I totally agree with Amanda here. I think the main reasons why Aston Martin is performing as poorly, I guess you could say, as they are right now is because the other teams ahead of them have brought the upgrades throughout the season, right? Whereas Aston Martin, as Amanda said, it has just pretty much remained stagnant. So even if like their car's performing the same as it was at the start of the season, the other cars are now outperforming them and doing much better. So Aston Martin really has to turn things around by bringing some sort of magical upgrades, like McLaren did right after the summer break. But I think that otherwise, it's going to be a tough end of the season for them. And I think that it does seem like at this point that things are falling apart for the team.
Now, follow for both of you, starting with you, Isha. In the past, we've seen Fernando Alonso. He could get very critical of the team when they're not delivering, when they're starting to struggle. We saw this with McLaren. Came in very excited. That did not work out. Alpine came back excited, reunited with the Renault team. It seemed by the end he was ready to leave. Started optimistic, frustrated, and then relieved to get out. This year started great, one of his best in a long time, but now McLaren is looking at overtaking them in the constructors, and then they'll only be ahead of Alpine, the team he left. Could the struggle of the Aston Martin team test the patience of Fernando Alonso?
Joe, I personally feel like Aston Martin's struggles have already been testing his patience, especially seeing how your teammate is performing so poorly in like the past, like the majority of the races this season. I think that's definitely going to be very frustrating for him. And on top of that, seeing all the other teams, like I mentioned before, outperforming you, they're all bringing these upgrades, and then you're just stagnant. You're pretty much stuck. You're the only one that's trying to bring any points to the team. I think that it's gotta be testing his patience, and I think it's definitely a very frustrating situation for him to be in right now.
I have to agree again. Alonso has limited amounts of time left in his career, and he's a championship caliber driver, obviously. He's a champion. So I think that it's fair for him to have very little patience to be in a car that's underperforming because this late in his career, what's the point of being there if not to win championships and contend for wins? So it's understandable if he's frustrated, and I don't see him sticking around long term if things don't turn around.
It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Aston Martin if things doesn't get turned around because McLaren, 11 points away from tying Aston Martin and then, of course, overtaking them. Very possible if Lando Norris was to get a podium finish and a points finish for Oscar Piastri with where they're starting. That is totally possible with the Aston Martin teams looking at potentially no points this weekend if they don't improve from their 17th, 19th finish. Now, Lando Norris, he is going to be in that front row, but we know behind him, you got the Mercedes. They're going to be there. Carlos Sainz, he's going to be there as well too. George Russell. One of the big things I got to ask you, Amanda, when it comes to this, concerning the pace of McLaren, they've been fast for quite some time after that summer break. Getting the podiums, a lot of people feel like they're the second fastest behind the Red Bull. Could McLaren and essentially Lando Norris overcome a rough start being on that 30 side of the grid, starting second? And if he was third, maybe even fourth place exiting turn one, he could still come back towards the win?
I think that if he loses positions at the start, it's definitely going to be a bit of an uphill battle for him, just considering the cars around him being pretty even, or maybe with the Mercedes even slightly better over long runs, just in terms of consistency. But yeah, things have definitely turned around on McLaren's end, and they have definitely had the race pace, it seems, over several of the last few races. That being said, I think that they even outperformed themselves a little bit more. Like where Lando ended up was not quite where they were projected to be in terms of that one lap speed. So I'm interested to see how they it'll play out over the course of a slightly longer race. But yeah, we'll see. I think that it would be definitely be in Lando's best interest to maintain those positions at the start.
Yeah, I think it's important for Lando to maintain that position, but I also feel like if he does drop to 3rd place or 4th place at that first turn, I don't particularly think that it would be a make or break situation. I think that the McLarens have really good pace, Joe. As you mentioned, it might even be the best right after the Red Bulls. So I think that if he drops to 3rd or 4th place, he could potentially make his way back up to 2nd place. But as Amanda said, I'm just really excited to see what plays out on Sunday and how the race happens because, in the front, we've also got Charles Leclerc. It's a very mixed front line. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens and just who ends up pulling out in front on that first turn.
And Charles Leclerc, he is hungry for a win. He would love to get a win. It'll be crazy to think that the Red Bull winning streak snapped by Ferrari. Charles Leclerc trying to do that, keep that, because we know Sainz got the win. It's going to be very exciting. I think he's definitely one to watch. And of course, we have to watch the sprint race. That's going to be coming up with the qualifying for the sprint effort. And then, of course, the sprint race later today. Now, if Verstappen is to, he's probably going to be motivated to get the pole, go out there and win. But if for some reason we see a repeat and he has 4th, 5th, or even 6th place starting grid, could this play a bigger advantage for Max Verstappen because it is almost practice for the next day where he has to work his way through the front of the field? And could the other teams be following Max, seeing what he does? Isha, what's your take on that?
I personally feel like Max is definitely going to try his hardest to get the pole because we know that he doesn't really think in the sense of, oh, maybe I'll go slower today just to be able to push more tomorrow. Max is always, trying his hardest to win everything. So I personally don't see him not getting pole. And if he doesn't get the pole, if he finishes, as you said, like 4th, 5th, or 6th, I think that would just be because the other teams beat him, not because he was trying to find an advantage in going slower. So I don't really see him purposefully trying to go any slower and, finishing farther back in the grid. Um, so, if he does finish in 4th or 5th or 6th, I think that would just be accidental in the sense that the other cars outperformed him, not because he was purposefully trying to go slower.
I have to agree. He definitely wouldn't purposefully try to go slow. I just think, track limits might come into play here or traffic on a lap, anything that could cause him to start a little bit further back. But with that, like you said, Joe, it would kind of just play as a simulation for him and definitely give him the advantage on Sunday in the Grand Prix when he's already learned how kind of the other teams have kind of exposed their hand a little bit in the sprint if people are starting ahead of him. And then he'll know better what to do and how to adjust from starting a little bit further back on the field on Sunday.
And it sort of reminds me of Brazil when we had a sprint weekend with Lewis Hamilton towards the back, worked his way towards the front of the sprint, and then the Grand Prix. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Of course, that's all going to be later today. Now, one of the big things is with the sprint race, one driver many people have eyes on is Sergio Perez this weekend. This race, then his home country in Mexico. So he has to be pretty excited going there. He knows he's going to have family, friends, everybody. Daniel Ricciardo, he is also back for this race weekend as well. So he's going to be back, of course, for the remainder of the season after Liam Lawson was replacing for him. Now, there are rumors that Perez, if he was to lose second place in the standings, Daniel Ricciardo will be the one to inherit his seat. We know Ricciardo will love the opportunity to have the Red Bull race against Max Verstappen in the same equipment. Perez, he made Q3 for the Grand Prix. We're going to find out what he does for the sprint. He is 30 points ahead of Lewis Hamilton right now. So, Amanda, does the time of the United States Grand Prix and the Mexico City Grand Prix, where he's surrounded by supporters and fans, will that help his motivation, or could that cause more pressure because he has a lot more people expecting good things on him?
I honestly think it could only help just being surrounded in a familiar environment for him, and then also just with his like staunchest supporters surrounding him and kind of drowning out a lot of the negative press that he's been receiving lately, despite having a fairly decent season in terms of his overall results as a driver. It's just he's been put up against Max, and it's hard to hold your own against Max. But yeah, I think that the next few weekends are a good opportunity for Checo. He's definitely going to have a lot of support from the Mexican fans, both in the States and in at his home race. But yeah, I think that this should only help him.
Yeah, I agree. I think that being in Mexico is definitely going to help him when he's surrounded by all those supporters because as Amanda mentioned, people have been so critical of him these past few races, but I think that once he sees all that support, it's definitely going to help him. And the majority of the drivers do say that going to their home races definitely does help them when they see all that support and all the love that they get. And we've also seen many of the drivers perform better at their home races. So I think that Mexico is definitely going to be a good point for Sergio Perez, and I think that it's just going to help him even more.
It's going to be interesting. Of course, the Formula One race weekend here in the United States. It's not going to be the last one. We still got Las Vegas later on, but it's going to be very interesting to see what happens at Circus of the Americas this weekend. We'll recap it all on Sunday. One race will be recapping as well on Sunday, Isha. NASCAR Cup Series, Homestead-Miami race weekend.
That's right, Joe. Now looking at NASCAR, Kevin Harvick is making his final start at Homestead, the site of his 2014 Cup Series championship. Joe, he is still winless. Could he have a potential chance at the win?
One of the things I would say when it comes to Kevin Harvick and his chances of winning, it is slim. We know Stewart Haas Racing does not have the best equipment right now. The Fords are a little bit behind. I think Ford is putting a lot of attention on Blaney, RFK Racing right now to try to get one of their cars in the championship for. Kevin Harvick has been able to pull off top 10 finishes throughout the season with that Stewart Haas Racing team. It's going to be, I think, a top 10 finish day unless we have some chaos where some of the playoff drivers have bad luck. They're going to be hard to beat. If they have bad luck, you could expect Kevin Harvick to be in the front. But we've had races where Kevin Harvick's been towards the front. Darlington comes to mind. Good races there, just come up a little short. Talladega, which of course is a wild card, but he got disqualified from that. I think he is going to have a rough day. Top 10 is going to be at the most he could get, I think.
Yeah, I have to agree. After he didn't qualify super well and is starting towards the back, mid pack, I think 22nd he's starting. So there's a lot of work to be done from that position, especially when you're competing against these playoff drivers who are definitely going to be throwing everything they have at this race, trying to lock themselves into Phoenix. So it's going to be a tough day for Harvick, and his opportunity to bring home a win is running out. But if anyone can do it, he's the one who will be there in the end to pick up the pieces if something goes wrong for other drivers, like you said.
Now, looking towards a driver who won last weekend, we have Kyle Larson. He's coming off a win and he would love to have another win here. Now, he won this race last year, and if he wins, it will put everyone on edge for next week. So, Joe, would Larson and his team be driven to race harder to get a win and put the pressure on everyone at Martinsville?
I say yes, and he would love to put everyone in the must-win situation entering Martinsville because that's going to take away the resources and time from the teams focusing on Homestead instead of having to focus on Martinsville, making sure they have a good setup. We've seen drivers like Ryan Blaney in the past come to Martinsville, bad setup, they're just done for. They can't do anything. While Kyle Larson's team, they could really be focusing on Homestead. In fact, I would not be surprised if right now they already have some engineers work on that home Phoenix car, the Homestead car, because they know they could do that. If he doesn't win at Homestead, it's not the end of the world. He's still in the championship four. But look at those points total. If Byron doesn't have a good day, or better yet, Byron has a good day but doesn't get the win, he could comfortably get the win in Martinsville. Hendricks are always good there, and that puts the Toyotas and the Fords in must-win situation in Martinsville. I think Kyle Larson is going to try to go all out, get this win, because he would love to make it where it's easier for his teammate and harder for the Fords and the Toyotas.
Yeah, just looking at the points totals, it's just such slim margins. Like, even halfway through the race, we can see like major shakeups at the end of like stage two. So I think that yeah, Kyle Larson's obviously going to be going for the win. I don't know why he wouldn't be, but obviously he's in a more secure place. So I think that just makes him even more of a threat because he can race harder, knowing that he's already locked in. Um, but yeah, I think he's going to be doing everything he can do to take away points from the other drivers and just make his championship battle easier.
Now, one driver that many see as a potential favorite for this weekend is Tyler Reddick in the 45 Toyota. He has the Hamburglar paint scheme on the car and he comes in under the cut line. Now, Amanda, if he wins, do you feel that he, in the spirit of the hamburger, stole a championship four spot?
I don't know about that. I think that Tyler Reddick, he's shown like really strong pace and flashes of strong pace, and has definitely been there when he needs to be, and pulled off some. Uh, he's pulled off like a great win and great finishes. So I think that Tyler Reddick is a deserving championship four. I don't think he's maybe in everyone's championship four, but he wouldn't. It wouldn't surprise me if he makes it to Phoenix.
It wouldn't make me surprised if he made the championship four just because we know Homestead is a good track for him. But I think a lot of folks they did not anticipate Tyler Reddick to be this far into playoffs because we know coming into the playoffs they had to win, but it seemed like they sort of flatlined. They thought, okay, he'll make it into the round of 12. Will he make it to the round of 8? That was questionable. He made it in. He got that win. Case closed. So I think there's still a lot of people that are convinced he is not in the championship four. They're looking at William Byron for sure, Denny Hamlin, and then potentially Martin Truex Jr. But this is where Tyler Reddick, I feel, really is going to prove he's up there with those three because Martin Truex is not running at the pace he should be running. He has been struggling throughout this playoffs. Tyler Reddick, he stepped it up with a win. I have had to make it, I think, unanimous. He's not stealing, but I think if he does get the win, social media will go crazy if he was wearing the Hamburglar hat.
Definitely. And now we know that there are some favorites like Larson and Reddick. We also have past winners like Truex, Hamlin, Byron, and Harvick. However, a playoff driver has won this race every time the race has been in the playoffs. This track has multiple grooves and is very competitive. So, Joe, starting with you, could we see a non playoff driver win? And if a playoff driver has a poor qualifying effort, possibly win from the back?
It is possible to win from the back. With all the grooves here, the different lines, you're not confined to one or two grooves, with that outside groove being very limited. The progressive banking at this track just adds that race where everybody loves this racetrack. Everybody loves coming here because it's such a raceable track. So qualifying, if you're towards the back, I think you're going to be okay if you have good strategy and a good handling car. You're not in the front because obviously you didn't have a good qualifying effort. You could put together everything to have a good race, work on that car throughout the race. You're going to be in a really good position to make up the positions, work your way to the front. For the non-playoff drivers, that's going to be really hard. Out of the past winners in Homestead, they're almost all in the playoffs. I really don't see a non-playoff team going up there. We know Ross Chastain has scored the most points on mile and a half ovals. He was running towards the front, but I don't know if Homestead's going to really suit him. That could be my one maybe out of the non-playoff drivers. Of course, you got Chase Elliott in the owners' playoffs, but he's in the owners' playoff. But after what happened last week, I think he's motivated. It's just does he show up on top of the game or struggle like last week?
Yeah, I have to agree that I think if I were to pick one, Ross would be my non-playoff driver pick for this week. But it definitely these teams are throwing everything into it, and there are a lot of teams that are winless and are trying to take advantage of these last few opportunities to sort of revive or salvage seasons that hadn't panned out the way that they wanted to. But yeah, I think that looking at the entrance for this week, Ross Chastain, if a non-playoff driver were to win, it could be him.
Now, looking ahead, after Homestead is Martinsville, and while it's not as wild as Talladega or the Roval, Martinsville can be a bit unpredictable. So, which playoff drivers don't want to enter Martinsville winless and most likely in a must win situation? Amanda, what do you think?
Well, pretty much all of them, but obviously Ryan Blaney doesn't want to be there winless. He'd just be way too far back. Same with Chris Buescher. We'll see how this weekend plays out for Tyler Reddick, and if he's able to flip himself above that cut line. Obviously, any driver that runs into some bad luck this weekend is going to be put in a must-win situation there. So I think that no one's really feeling that safe, as you can see, like the just single digits separating everyone above the cut line. So I think that it's honestly safe to say that people are already in a must-win situation and feeling the heat.
Feeling the heat entering Martinsville, you don't want to be on the hot seat because one of the big things, even William Byron, if he has an average day here, still single digits, we know Hendrick Motorsports is fast and competitive at Martinsville, but it takes one late restart and the car behind you to give you the bumper, push you out of the way, and you could be out of the playoffs. I mean, we're not going to see the Hail Melon move that's been banned, but Denny Hamlin went from you're in the championship four to you're out from turn three to the starting finish line on the last lap. It only takes a bumper. Everybody, as Amanda says, does not want to enter Martinsville winless. Even Christopher Bell, he could be above the cut line, below the cut line, above being better because then you got a points cushion, but you can't rely on that points cushion. The beating and banging in Martinsville is going to be aggressive. And the thing, too, it is a bit unpredictable, but the one thing you can predict, you know which drivers are going to race you in what manner. If Joey Logano was in the playoffs, you know he's going to give you the back bumper. He does not care about you. He's going to go for the win. Logano, you do not want to be racing for the win if you're on the cut line. But if you have to get that win, you're going to have to put elbows out and just give it back to Logano because this race, you get in the championship for, this is going to change everything. I'm convinced if Raj Chastain did not do that move last year and did not make the championship for, much different fortunes for Trackhouse Racing from the off season to this year. Martinsville, as Amanda said, nobody wants to enter their win list. It puts a premium on winning at Homestead-Miami this weekend.
Definitely. And now let's head over to our very own points championship of Pick a Winner.
Pick a winner. Taking a look at standings, nobody picked Johann Zarco to win today. So it all remains the same, including tied at the points between Kobe and Alex. So we're going to start with Formula One, picking the winner for the sprint race and the Grand Prix. Isha, starting with you, who do you have?
Joe, I've been thinking about this for quite a while and I still don't have a pick, so I think I'm just going to pick someone random now. Max Verstappen, he's definitely going to win one of the two. I don't want to put him down for both, even though I think it's likely. But I'm going to say Max Verstappen for the sprint. And for the Grand Prix, ugh, I don't know. I feel like the Grand Prix is a lot harder to choose for if I'm not going to pick Max Verstappen. I'll go Charles Leclerc and hope for the best.
Wow, Charles Leclerc, that'll be huge. Amanda, who you got for the F1 races?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see a bit of a shakeup, but I'm just gonna play it safe. I'm gonna pick Max for both and be boring there. And I just have very little faith in the rest of the field's ability to hold him behind. So we'll see.
For the sprint, I think I'm going to go with Max Verstappen. For the Grand Prix, I'm going out on a limb. I'm going to say Lando Norris finally gets it done, and he's going to do it in the United States, and I think that's going to be a huge boost for F1 viewership for the remainder of the season and an American audience. So I think Lando Norris, McLaren, get it done. But in the event we have a Max Verstappen sweep, we do have our special bonus, pick seventh place. So starting with you, Amanda, who's going to finish seventh place in the sprint and the Grand Prix?
Okay. Seventh place in the sprint and the Grand Prix. I'm gonna go with Oscar Piastri.
I'm going to say Oscar Piastri for the actual race, 7th place, and then for the Grand Prix, I mean for the sprint, mm, I don't know, maybe let's say Pierre Gasly.
I'm thinking for the sprint, Fernando Alonso, 7th place. And then for the Grand Prix, I'm going to go with the person that got me points last time, Esteban Ocon, 7th place. Now, this leaves NASCAR Cup Series. This is going to be, I think, a fun race. I know, Isha, your person last weekend came 2nd place, so close. But now here we are, a brand new race weekend. Amanda, starting with you, who is going to win the NASCAR Cup Series Homestead-Miami race?
Yeah, this is always impossible to predict. I think I'm just gonna go with William Byron because he seems to be able to pull out a win when it's needed most, and he's, just been on this winning tear this season, and he's been a little bit quiet for the past couple weeks. So I think that it's time for another William Byron win.
I'm going to go with one of the favorites that we talked about. I'm going to say Tyler Reddick.
Tyler Reddick, a good choice. I think I'm going to go with the driver that a lot of people love to boo. Denny Hamlin, I think, is going to get it done at Homestead, putting a Toyota for sure in the championship 4. It's going to be very exciting to see what happens. Comment in the chat room from Casey Campbell. Corey Heim is leading stage 1 of the truck race at Homestead. Corey Heim, of course, the truck series, they're all going on right now, and we'll recap that on Grid Encore. And be sure to subscribe to us right here on YouTube so you don't miss Grid Encore on Monday. They're going to recap Xfinity Series, NASCAR Truck Series, and all the other series that are not part of the Grid Ranking. And of course, we're going to wrap up everything tomorrow on Grid Life Wrap Up. So subscribe, hit the bell icon, and check out our LinkedIn. If you're looking to motorsports journalism, want to get your foot in the door, we have opportunities. Big thank you to Colin the Show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for making these opportunities possible. They invest in the Grid Network each and every month. We greatly appreciate it. They're getting stickers in the mail. If you want some Grid Network stickers, just go ahead and subscribe to our Patreon. You could do a one-time contribution on Buy Me a Coffee or YouTube Super Chat. If you're watching us and we're not live, you'll see the thanks button. You could contribute that way to the Grid Network or a particular member of the Grid Network team. They'll thank you on the air next time we're all on the air. For Isha and Amanda, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time, and enjoy the races. Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.